The same data set as you have read. So if you have read something within the first data set, if you have read something within this data set, if you have read this, you could read this too, within the same data set. Okay? So if you want to check for read permission, or the object that you want to read belongs to a conflict of interest from which S has not accessed any information. Like as I said, if you have read only an data set belonging to oil company and you want to read a data set belonging to the car companies, you can read whichever you want because you have not read anything in the car companies. But once you have read something from the car companies belonging to this set, you cannot read anything from set 2B. But you could read another object in the same data set if you want to. Basically because you don't want to read a company's document and then read another company's document, because then you get to know what both of them are doing, so it's a conflict of interest. But within the data same company, you can read multiple documents belonging to that same company. Okay? Now the write rule is even more rigid. To check whether a subject S can write an object, the subject can read O should read O according to the read rule. So this is the minimum requirement. The subject should have the read permission or should be able to read the object, as well as, and no object has been read by the subject which is in a different data set to the one on which a write is performed. Which means you cannot read more than one data set, because you want to write to a particular data set and you should not have read to any other data set. So it's very restrictive. Now the way you get around that restriction is there is something called sanitization. It's slightly different from what we saw for SQL injection attacks. So here by sanitization what we mean is you remove all the proprietary information. This is mostly for all the defense companies and all these things where it's applied. If you want to be very secret about what you're storing. You remove all the proprietary information, who owns the object or anything you consider sensitive. And once you remove all those information from the object, that can be shared then. Okay? So the object, if it is say in the if once you have a sanitized object over here, that object would be returned to a different conflict of interest. So an object of an oil company can be returned to an object here in the car companies. But of course still you cannot share within the same oil companies across the different data sets. It will be definitely a conflict of interest. But once you remove all the proprietary information, a car company cannot gain anything out of an object of an oil company. So you can write something from here to here. Okay? So that's what is relaxation to the write policy. Any question? Now there is one kind of small theorem, not theorem, a kind of justification why the read rule is important for write. Okay, so let's go through this example. And this is very unique for this Chinese wall model. Why you need to have the read permission for to check for the write thing. So let's say there are two users. So this would be a question to make sure you understand it. So let's say there are two users, John and Jane. John has read permission. As I said, John can have read permission on multiple objects as long as they don't have conflicts of interest. So 1A, 2A means one is one, say, oil company and the data set belonging to that oil company, and 2 is, say, the car company. So he can have read permission on two different conflicts of interest. And Jane has read permission on 1B and 2A. Okay? So now let's say you are not checking to do a write operation, you are not checking for the read permission. So then we'll come back and say we need to have the read permission. Okay? So let's say there's no read check to do a write. So what John wants to do is he wants to copy an object from dataset 1A and he wants to write it to 2A. As you know, John can read both of them, right? So there's no conflict of interest in the sense that you can write anything from 1A to 2A, because they're two different companies, oil company and car company. Now let's see what happens. So one object belonging to 1A is now in 2A, right? Now Jane also has access to 2A. So what she can do is, she can look at the object that John has written in 2A, and since she has also what? Read permission on 2B, right? She can take up this object and write it to 1B, not 2B, 1B. She can take up the object that is now in 2A and write it in 1B. And these two are not conflict of interest, right? So she can write that object now which is in 2A to 1B. But originally this object came from where? From 1A. So there's an object, say X, and that object, John wrote that object to 2A from where? 1A to 2A, and John can do that because we don't check for the read permission, right? So John can do this writing, and Jane accessed this and wrote it to what? 1B. So now that object X is in 1B, and you don't want that to happen. Some secret of this oil company is now in the data set of the other oil company.
So why Jane can read both 1B and 2A?
Jane can have multiple read because this 1 and 2 are two different conflict of interest, right? This is an oil company, this is a car company. So she can have multiple read access. As long as, since she has read 1B, she cannot read 1A or 1C, but she can read 2A because they are two different companies. Remember the picture there? She can read something from here and she can read something from here. The only thing is she cannot read more than one data set within the oil company, or she cannot read more than one within the car company. But she can read one car company's data set and one oil company's data set.
But then the John read 2 from the...
Right, he can write 2. So what we are discussing is why the read permission is important to be checked. Okay? To do a write. If you don't check for the read permission to do a write, something like what I said can happen. John will write to this set, and then Jane can pick up that and write to 1B. And now the object is in 1B, but the object came originally from 1A. So it will be like what?
It actually went to 1A and 1B on the same set.
Right. So you don't
It's sort of like a secret injection, like that that database problem we did. We had to, the inference.
It's kind of like not real inference, but yes. So someone acted as if they are neutral to, they're nice to you, and they through them the other person, your enemy, got to know. Right. So go through this and come back, and there are some sample questions like here. Make sure you can answer those questions according to the Chinese wall model. Okay, I have answers too, so go through the answers. Make sure you understand the read and write rules, and we'll continue discussing.